Hey everyone, in today's video we are going to talk about how readers can make connections to the stories they read. Now in the K-2 world, we spend a lot of time teaching students phonics and how to decode words, which rightfully so we should, but that means we need to be very purposeful about our read aloud time so we can make sure we are developing our students' comprehension and vocabulary. One comprehension strategy we can use when doing that is to have students make connections. When they are able to make some authentic connections to the stories they read or listen to, students not only gain a better understanding of the text, but also a better understanding of the world around them. So in this video, I have a few strategies and a few book suggestions that I think you will like for teaching about connections. If you've watched my videos before, then welcome back, and if not, my name is Susan Jones. I am a former first grade and K-2 literacy teacher who now spends a lot of time here on YouTube making videos like this for teachers like you. So if you're ready to dive in, give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, and let's go. Okay, so you're probably familiar that there are 3 different types of connections we are used to teaching to our young students, and that is a text-to-self connection, a text-to-text connection, and a text-to-world connection. Now with all 3 of these types of connections, we really want students to draw upon their prior knowledge and prior experiences to be able to make these meaningful connections. Now there's a few things I usually do when teaching about connections. First is I always make sure I make an anchor chart that I add to as we learn about each different connection type, and we usually start with text-to-self connections. So I'll explain to the class what a text-to-self connection is. I will draw probably a little picture of a book and an arrow to a stick figure to show text to self. I'm making a connection about something in my own life to this story, and then we will practice it through a read aloud. Now, when you are choosing your story for a read aloud, you want to make sure that you are modeling some text to self connections you're making aloud. I like to model at least 3 or 4 different connections I'm making as I read the story, so students are like, oh, that's what this sounds like, that's what this looks like, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, on the day or days that we are doing text to self connections, I like to write 2 questions up on the board. I like to write, does this story remind me of anything in my own life? And can I relate to any character in this story? I let students know that those are my guiding questions as I'm listening to this read aloud. Does this remind me of anything that's happening in my own life? And can I relate to any of these characters in some sort of way? I'd probably spend about 2 days on each of the connection types, and as students make some meaningful connections to the story, you will write down some examples of a text-to-self connection on the anchor chart. Then we can move on to text-to-text connections and add that to our anchor chart. So that would go in the next box, and I usually like to do a book with an arrow to another book, text to text. And again, you're going to model some of these examples as you do your read aloud. Now, some of the guiding questions I like for this include, is the character in this story like any other characters we've read about? And how is this book similar or different to other ones we've read? On the anchor chart, you will want to write down one of your modeled examples of a good text-to-text connection you made, and then also some examples of meaningful connections students have made. And then of course you move on to text-to-world connections and add that to the anchor chart. Now when you're doing text-to-world, I like to draw a picture of a book with an arrow to the world or the earth or a globe, text-to-world. And the guiding questions I like for that include, have you seen or heard about anything like this happening in the world around you? And how is what's happening in this story similar or different than something you have seen or heard about in your life? Now, once you've practiced this for about a week, you will definitely want to leave that anchor chart up there and really encourage your students to make any different type of connection they can while they're reading, whether it's during independent reading time or daily 5, or if they're reading books on Epic, or even when they are just listening to you do a read aloud. Have them think about any of those connections and encourage them to share them with others and with you. Now, quick side note before I dive into some great texts to use with this skill, but just a reminder that in a K-2 classroom, your students' connections that they make are probably going to start pretty surface level. They might read a story and be like, oh, connection, I have a dog. Hello. I have brown hair like her. Hello, of course. And that's perfectly fine to start off with, but then we want to dive a little bit deeper and guide them towards some more meaningful connections. For example, just a week or two ago, I was in a classroom and we had read Creepy Carrots, which I loved that book for Halloween. And then the class loved it so much that they also wanted to read Creepy Pair of Underwear by the same author. And while we were reading that book, we saw an image of Krakenhopper Field, which is in Creepy Carrots. And some of the kids were like, oh, Miss Jones, that is Krakenhopper Field. That is a text-to-text connection. And that is a text-to-text connection. It's something that's the same in both books, but it's pretty surface level. But since we started there, I was like, oh, you're right. This same exact thing is in the same book, which isn't surprising because it's the same author. How cool is that? Can we think of any other things that are the same about this book? And then I told them, I'm noticing as I'm looking at the covers, here's two pictures of what the covers of the book look like, that I'm seeing something similar in the illustrations. And I asked them to think about what the illustrator might be doing in both of these stories. And they got to the point that, the story is very dark. It's mostly gray and black with pops of orange in Creepy Carrots and pops of green in Creepy Pair of Underwear. And then we talked about why would the illustrator do that. And the students determined because, this is supposed to be a creepy book and usually creepy things are dark like that. And so that was a great text-to-text connection that they made that started off with the simple one about Krakenhopper Field. This is just a friendly reminder that your students in kindergarten, first and second grade aren't expected to have mastered making these very deep and meaningful connections to a story just yet. It's something they're going to practice as they continue reading all the way through middle school, high school, and hopefully as they become an adult. But by you kind of guiding them along and really trying to get a little bit more out of them in terms of that meaningful connection, that you're training them to think that way and exposing them to that. So hopefully they can have a leg up on those connections. And lastly, I just wanted to share a few of my favorite books for making connections. If you do a quick Google search, you will find tons of different read alouds and mentor texts for making all sorts of connections, but I wanted to share a few of my favorite. For making text-to-self connections, I love using No David by David Shannon. Many kids can relate and laugh about kind of getting in trouble and their parents saying no, 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 no. And I also love David Goes to School, also by David Shannon, because all of your kids have had that experience of going to school and they can talk about how they may relate to those experiences. Another one I love is The Relatives Came by Cynthia Ryland, because it is a great book about a big, large family gathering that some of your students may also have experience with. And also, any type of social emotional learning book is also great for making text-to-self connections. For example, The Koala Who Could by Rachel Bright. This is about a time where somebody may have been scared before to try something new, and you can ask your students if they can relate. Another great one with a very similar theme is Jabari Jumps, which also reminds me, social emotional learning books are also great for making connections for text to text. Students can really kind of see, in The Koala Who Could, the main character, Kevin, really had to take a risk. He had to be brave and he was nervous to do something. And likely in K-2, you've read many other stories where the character felt the same way, just like in Jabari Jumps. For text-to-text connections, I actually love reading books by the same author. It helps us start off on a very surface level. For example, Jabari Jumps and Jabari Tries. A very simple connection they're all gonna say is, they both have Jabari. And they do. They have the same main character. They're written by the same author and illustrator. But this is where we can say, okay, now how are these stories similar, but also how are they different? We can really compare and contrast when you use books by the same author. And lastly, for text to world, some easy ones I love reading around Earth Day include The Lorax and The Great Kapok Tree. Both of these really elicit some great conversation with your students about taking care of the earth and using what they read in that book to also make their earth a better place. And now I want to know from you, what are your favorite mentor texts for making connections? Drop them down in the comment section below and also write down what type of connection they're great for having students make in the classroom. So there you have some ideas for students making connections to their texts in a K-2 classroom. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up so I know. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel and click that bell. That way you're notified of every new video. See you in the next one. Bye.